Target might seem like one of the safest places to shop, but behind those bright red walls, some truly terrifying things have happened. In today's video, I'll share 5 real Target horror stories that will make you think twice about your next late-night trip. And trust me, story number 5 is by far the scariest one, so stay with me till the end. I was 19 when I got my first job at Target. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid better than the fast food places in my town, and at the time, that was all I cared about. I usually worked closing shifts, which meant clocking in around 5 in the evening and staying until midnight. Most nights were uneventful. Long hours of folding clothes, people left scattered in the aisles, restocking shelves, cleaning up the toy section after kids destroyed it. But something happened one night that still gives me chills whenever I think about it. It was late November, just after Black Friday. The store had been trashed earlier in the week, so even though the holiday rush had slowed, the place was still a mess. Management wanted the floor spotless for the weekend, so we were all on edge about getting everything done. That night, I was one of the last employees scheduled. Only 3 of us were closing: me, a girl named Melissa, and our supervisor, Jim. Around 10:30, I was assigned to the electronics section. It was quiet, and I was grateful for that because the holiday rush had left me completely drained. I remember stacking DVDs back onto shelves and humming to myself when I noticed something strange. There was a man wandering slowly up and down the aisles. At first, I thought he was just another late-night shopper. But the way he moved caught my attention. He wasn't looking at the products. He didn't have a cart or even a basket. He just walked slowly, almost dragging his feet, staring at the shelves without ever picking anything up. I glanced over at him a few times, trying not to be obvious, but he gave me this weird feeling in my stomach. His clothes looked wrinkled and dirty, like he'd been wearing them for days. His hair was greasy, and when he turned his head slightly, I noticed dark circles under his eyes. He didn't approach me, didn't say anything, just kept pacing the aisles row by row like he was looking for something, or waiting for something. Around 11, Melissa passed through electronics, pushing a cart full of returns. I stopped her and asked, "Hey, have you seen that guy?" I nodded toward the man, but when we looked, he was gone. She shrugged it off. "Probably just another weirdo. It's late, people get sketchy after 10. I wanted to believe her, so I went back to my work. But 20 minutes later, I caught sight of him again. This time, he wasn't in electronics. He was standing near the clothing section, half hidden between 2 racks. He wasn't moving. He was just standing perfectly still, staring out toward the main aisle. When he noticed me looking, he quickly turned and walked away. I remember feeling my chest tighten. Something about the way he moved, it wasn't like a normal shopper. It felt deliberate, cautious, like he didn't want to be seen. By 11:45, the store was nearly empty. Jim had made the closing announcement over the speakers, and the last customers were paying for their stuff. I started sweeping the aisle near electronics when I noticed the guy again, this time on the security monitor mounted above the register. The screen showed a wide view of the toy section, and there he was, just standing in the middle of the aisle, not moving. I turned to tell Jim, but when I looked back, the screen flickered and the man was gone. That was the first time real fear started creeping in. We finished locking the doors at midnight. No customers left inside, or at least that's what we thought. Melissa went to the back to handle inventory. Jim was in his office, and I was left sweeping up near the stockroom entrance. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, dragging footsteps echoing down the hallway toward the warehouse. "Melissa?" I called out. No answer. I set the broom down and walked cautiously toward the sound. The hallway lights flickered overhead, buzzing faintly, and for a moment I felt like I was the only person in the building. My pulse quickened. The footsteps stopped. I turned the corner toward the stockroom, and that's when I noticed the door was cracked open. That door is always locked. Always. I pushed it open slowly and peeked inside. The warehouse was dimly lit, with stacks of boxes piled high on metal shelves. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. I almost turned back, but then I heard it. Above me, the faint sound of movement, something shifting in the ceiling. I tilted my head back and froze. One of the ceiling tiles above the shelves was slightly ajar, and I swear, I saw the corner of a shoe vanish into the darkness. My whole body went cold. I bolted back down the hallway and nearly ran into Jim, who had come out of his office after hearing me call out. I told him someone was in the warehouse ceiling. He didn't believe me at first, but when he saw the open door and the displaced tile, his face went pale. He immediately called security. When the guards arrived, they searched the entire store. They climbed up into the ceiling and found something that made my skin crawl. A ladder had been propped up against the shelves, leading straight to the ceiling tiles. Up there, they found a pile of blankets, a half-empty bag of chips, water bottles, and even a small notebook. Someone had been living inside the Target. The man was gone. He must have slipped out when we were distracted, but the evidence was undeniable. He had been there for days, maybe weeks, hiding in the ceiling, watching employees, wandering the aisles after hours. The scariest part? Inside the notebook were pages and pages of scribbled notes. Most of them were nonsense, random words and drawings, but one page had my name on it, my full name. I don't remember ever telling him my name. I don't know how he knew. After that night, I never worked closing shift alone again. I quit a few months later, and to this day, I can't walk into a Target without glancing up at the ceiling, half expecting to see someone watching me from above. I've always been the kind of person who enjoys running errands late at night. Less traffic, fewer people, and a kind of calm that daytime crowds never seem to have. For me, Target was one of those comforting places. I could wander the aisles at my own pace, browse things I didn't even need, and leave with a cart that was somehow fuller than I'd planned. But after one night in particular, I stopped shopping late altogether. Because what happened in that Target parking lot made me realize just how quickly something ordinary can turn into a nightmare. It was a Thursday evening in late October. Work had been draining that week, and by the time I got home, I realized I was completely out of groceries and basic stuff like detergent. I could have waited until the weekend, but I didn't want to deal with the chaos of Saturday shoppers. So I decided to head out around 9:30 p.m. The air was crisp, the kind of chilly where you can see your breath under the streetlights. The Target parking lot looked quieter than usual when I pulled in. Most of the closer spaces were empty, but I parked further back under one of the tall lamps because I didn't feel like circling near the front. At the time, that decision seemed harmless. Looking back, it might have been the worst one I made that night. Inside, the store was nearly empty. A couple of moms with kids, a man comparing TV models in electronics, and a handful of employees restocking shelves. I grabbed a cart and started wandering. Like always, I got distracted, picked up a candle I didn't need, a hoodie from the clothing section, and a bunch of snacks on top of my groceries. By the time I finished, it was close to 10:15. I checked out, thanked the tired-looking cashier, and pushed my cart toward the sliding doors. That's when I noticed it. The parking lot was almost completely deserted. Maybe 5 or 6 cars left scattered across the rows. My car was parked near the back, under one of the flickering lamps. The moment I stepped outside, I felt uneasy. I brushed it off as paranoia. Empty lots at night always have that eerie, exposed feeling, like you're on display. The sound of my cart's wheels clicking across the pavement was the only thing breaking the silence. And then I saw it. A dark SUV, maybe navy, maybe black, it was hard to tell under the lights, was parked a few rows over. Its headlights were off, but I could see the faint glow of someone sitting inside. The engine wasn't running, at least not loudly enough for me to hear, but I felt eyes on me. I quickened my pace toward my car, forcing myself not to look directly at the SUV. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe someone was just waiting for a friend or scrolling on their phone before heading home. But then, the SUV moved, slowly, deliberately, pulling out of its spot, circling around the row behind me. The sound of its tires rolling over the pavement made my chest tighten. My heart started to pound. I kept walking, pretending not to notice, but every nerve in my body was screaming that something wasn't right. I reached my car and quickly loaded the bags into the trunk. The whole time, I could feel that SUV creeping closer, its movement slow, calculated, not like someone trying to leave, more like someone circling prey. By the time I closed the trunk, the SUV had pulled up directly across from me, just a few feet away. The driver didn't get out at first, he just sat there, staring. I didn't look long enough to make out his face, but I saw the outline of a man. broad shoulders, still as stone. I hurried into my car, slamming the door and locking it immediately. My hands were shaking so badly I fumbled with the keys. That's when I heard it, the click of another car door opening. The passenger side of the SUV cracked open, slowly, like whoever was inside didn't want to draw attention. Adrenaline surged through me. I jammed the key into the ignition and turned it so fast I thought I might break it. The engine roared to life, and in one motion I threw the car into reverse, tires screeching as I backed out of the space. The SUV door shut instantly. The driver pulled forward, following me. I remember the cold sweat dripping down my back, the way my chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what to do. Do I drive home and risk being followed? Do I call the police? Do I floor it and hope they lose me? Instinct kicked in. I sped toward the main road, but instead of turning toward my house, I swerved sharply into a gas station a few blocks away. It was brightly lit, with a couple of cars at the pumps and people inside the convenience store. Safety. Witnesses. I pulled up to a pump and pretended to get out, glancing into my rearview mirror. The SUV slowed as it passed the gas station. My heart hammered against my ribs. I was sure it was going to turn in after me, but it didn't. It kept going. The taillights disappeared down the road, swallowed by the night. I stood there, hands trembling, pretending to fumble with my gas cap just in case they were watching from somewhere nearby. After a few minutes, I got back in my car, drove around for a while to make sure I wasn't being followed, and finally went home. When I walked through my front door, I collapsed onto the couch, yet shaking so hard my teeth chattered. I replayed the whole thing over and over, trying to convince myself maybe it was nothing, maybe I was paranoid. But the next day, a coworker asked why I looked so pale, and I told her. She froze, then told me something that made my blood run cold. "There have been reports," she said, "about a dark SUV trying to abduct women at night around here. Parking lots, usually." I looked it up online later, and sure enough, there were multiple stories from my town and the next one over. A dark SUV, a man inside, circling, waiting. To this day, I don't know if it was the same guy, or if I was just unlucky enough to catch the attention of someone with bad intentions. But I do know this. If I hadn't locked my doors immediately, if I hadn't trusted my gut and gone to that gas station, I might not be here to tell this story. Now, whenever I go to Target, I never park far away from the entrance. And I never, ever shop alone at night. Because once you feel like prey, once you know what it's like to be hunted, that fear never fully goes away. I used to love shopping for clothes at Target. It wasn't even about the clothes half the time. There was something comforting about wandering into the fitting rooms with a handful of outfits, trying things on under those bright lights while the world outside stayed quiet. It was almost therapeutic. But one night, the fitting room became the most terrifying place I've ever been. It was a Sunday evening, close to closing time. I hadn't planned on buying anything, but I'd been feeling restless, so I drove out to Target around 9 p.m. The store was quiet when I got there, just a handful of people scattered through the aisles. I drifted through the clothing section and grabbed a few sweaters and jeans to try on. The woman at the fitting room counter was young, maybe college-aged, and looked like she was ready to clock out. She gave me a tired smile, counted my items, and handed me a small plastic tag with the number 5 on it. The fitting room hallway was empty. Just a long stretch of identical doors, each with a full-length mirror inside. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. I went into the second stall on the left, closed the door, and started trying things on. At first, it was normal, checking my reflection, debating sizes, fussing with how the clothes fit. But as I stood there in front of the mirror, I got this strange sensation, like the air in the room had shifted. It wasn't a sound at first. It was more like awareness, the feeling that someone was on the other side of that thin door, standing there silently. I froze, half in and half out of a sweater, listening. At first there was nothing, just the hum of the lights, the faint music playing from the store speakers. I almost laughed at myself for being paranoid. But then I heard it, a shuffle, soft, deliberate, like the sound of someone dragging their foot along the carpet outside my door. I crouched down quickly and looked under the gap. My breath caught in my throat. There was a pair of shoes, black, worn-out sneakers, facing my stall. Whoever it was, they weren't moving. They were just standing there, waiting. I didn't know what to do. My phone was in my bag on the little chair, but to grab it, I'd have to stand up and make noise. My mind raced. Maybe it was another customer. Maybe they were waiting for a stall. But then why weren't they knocking? Why were they just standing there? I stayed completely still, my heart pounding so loud I swore they could hear it. After what felt like forever, the shoes moved. Slowly they turned and walked down the hallway, their footsteps fading. I let out a shaky breath of relief and tried to convince myself it was nothing, just some impatient shopper. But then, as I pulled on another pair of jeans, I heard it again. This time, it wasn't footsteps. It was breathing. Right outside my stall. Heavy, uneven breathing. I dropped to the floor again and looked under the gap. The same shoes, the same stance, facing me. But now I could see the hem of jeans and the unmistakable shape of someone crouching down, like they were trying to peek under the door. I gasped and stumbled backward, hitting the mirror. The shoes shifted slightly, then disappeared. I didn't hear them walk away this time. They just seemed to vanish. I scrambled for my phone, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. I pulled up the keypad, ready to dial 911, when I heard a faint whisper through the thin fitting room wall. Pretty? It was so soft I almost thought I imagined it. My stomach turned to ice. I shoved my clothes back into my bag, not even bothering to hang them up, and opened the door. The hallway was empty, too empty. I rushed out, nearly colliding with the girl at the counter. She looked startled as I shoved the tag into her hand and muttered something about not wanting the clothes. On instinct, I turned back toward the fitting room hallway one last time. That's when I saw it. At the very end of the row, just before the lights flickered out of view, one of the stall doors was open, just slightly, and a pale hand was gripping the edge of it. I bolted. I didn't stop until I was outside, running across the parking lot to my car. I locked the doors, started the engine, and sat there shaking, scanning the store entrance to see if anyone followed me out. No one did. I drove home, my mind replaying that whisper over and over. I wanted to believe it was a prank, some creep messing around. But the thing that haunts me most is how silent they were, how deliberate, how patient. The next day, I called the store to report it. The manager said they'd review the cameras, but when I followed up later, they claimed they didn't find anything unusual. But I know what I saw, what I heard. And to this day, I can't step into a fitting room without feeling that same chill on the back of my neck, that at any second, a pair of shoes might appear under the door, and someone might be standing there, waiting for me. I used to work at Target when I was in college. It wasn't my dream job or anything, but it paid enough for gas, books, and groceries, so I stuck with it for almost a year. Most of the time it was boring, stocking shelves, cleaning up after customers, folding clothes in the fitting room section, but every once in a while, I'd get stuck with the closing shift. If you've never been inside a Target after hours, it's a strange experience. During the day, it feels warm and busy, filled with chatter and music and carts rattling across the floor. But at night, once the doors are locked and the customers are gone, it's like being inside a giant, empty warehouse. The background music shuts off. The lights dim in certain aisles to save power. Every sound you make echoes like you're the only person left in the world. At first, I thought those shifts would be peaceful. Less noise, no interruptions. But one Tuesday night, something happened that still keeps me awake when I think about it. It was late October, already cold outside, the kind of air that makes your breath fog up. Our store closed at 11 p.m., and on that night I was assigned to the back half of the store, seasonal, toys, and home goods. My manager told me to clean up that section, then meet everyone at the front, to clock out. The first couple of hours went fine. I straightened up the shelves, stacked some blankets, and walked through seasonal. But around 10:30, I started noticing something strange. I was folding a stack of throw pillows when I heard humming. At first I thought it was one of the other employees, maybe trying to kill time while finishing up. The tune was soft, kind of sing-songy, almost like a lullaby. I turned around, expecting to see one of my coworkers, but the aisle was empty. "Hello?" I called out, trying to sound casual. My voice echoed down the row of shelves. No response. I shrugged it off, telling myself maybe I imagined it. Stores make weird noises sometimes, vents, pipes, whatever. But a few minutes later, while I was stocking some candles, I heard it again. Closer this time. A low, steady hum, like someone was standing just a few feet behind me. I spun around so fast I nearly knocked over the display. But again, nothing. Just empty aisles stretching out in both directions. The air felt heavier, like the store itself was watching me. I shook it off and kept working, but my pace quickened. I just wanted to finish and get out. When I finally moved over to toys, that's when things really started to feel wrong. The lights in that section had dimmed more than usual, leaving the shelves in long shadows. I pushed my cart down the main aisle, trying not to think about the fact that all those dolls and action figures seemed to be staring at me through their boxes. That's when I saw it. At the far end of the toy aisle, maybe 30 feet away, a figure stood perfectly still. Small, child-sized. Too small to be any of my coworkers. For a second, I thought maybe some kid had gotten separated from their parents and hidden when the store closed. I started walking toward it, calling out, "Hey! We're closed. You're not supposed to be back here." The figure didn't move, but as I got closer, it slowly turned, like it was pivoting on invisible hinges, and stepped behind the shelves. My stomach dropped. I hurried down the aisle, checking both sides, even crouching to see if a kid was hiding under the racks. Nothing. The aisle was empty. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding, when something rolled across the floor. A ball, bright red. It came out of nowhere, bouncing once before stopping right at my feet. I froze. My throat was dry and the sound of my breathing filled the silence. I didn't touch the ball. I just stared at it until the sound of giggling echoed from somewhere deeper in the aisle, high-pitched, childlike. I backed away, my legs shaking, but before I could leave, the overhead lights flickered. One by one, the rows went dark behind me, like something was following me step for step. I forced myself to keep moving, pushing the cart faster, my eyes darting to every shadow. When I finally reached the end of the toy aisle and turned toward the front, I saw it again. The child, standing in the middle of the walkway, blocking my path. It wasn't right. Its head was tilted sharply to the side, like its neck had been bent too far. Its hair was dark and stringy, hanging over most of its face. The clothes it wore looked old, faded, torn, like something from decades ago. I froze, gripping the cart so hard my hands hurt. My voice shook when I whispered, "Who are you?" The figure didn't move, didn't even breathe. And then, without warning, every single toy around me came to life. Electronic laughter, sirens, plastic guns firing, dolls crying, all of it blared at once, a deafening wall of sound. The shelves shook with noise as if invisible hands had pressed every button at the same time. I stumbled back, covering my ears, my eyes locked on the figure in the walkway. But when I blinked, it was gone. The toys fell silent just as suddenly as they'd started. The silence that followed was even worse than the noise. I abandoned the cart right there. I didn't care about finishing. I sprinted to the front of the store, where the rest of the team was waiting. I must have looked pale because my manager frowned and asked if I was feeling okay. I feel sick, I lied, trying to keep my voice steady. They didn't press me. We clocked out, and I left the building as fast as I could. When I got into my car, I locked the doors immediately, but I couldn't bring myself to start the engine right away. I sat there, staring at the store entrance, half expecting to see that child standing there under the fluorescent lights, watching me. But nothing happened. When I got home that night, I told myself I must have imagined it. Stress, exhaustion, an overactive imagination. That's what I kept repeating as I tried to fall asleep. But the next morning, when I opened my work bag to take out my uniform, my stomach dropped. Inside, on top of my folded red shirt, was a bright red ball. The same size, the same shade. I know I didn't take it. I never touched that thing. I quit 2 weeks later. I told them it was because of school, but the truth is I couldn't stand the thought of being in that store at night again. Because once you've seen something that shouldn't exist, once you've heard laughter in an empty aisle, you never look at those aisles the same way again. I don't talk about this much because even years later, it still makes me shake when I think about it. But I know if I don't get it out, it'll just keep eating away at me. It happened when I was 19. I had just started working part-time at Target. Most shifts were normal, stocking shelves, cleaning, helping customers. But one night, I learned the hard way that you never really know who's walking around in those aisles. It was early November, the first night cold enough that I could see my breath when I walked outside. The store was open until 11, and I'd been assigned to work in the back half, unpacking shipments in the stock room and moving boxes to the floor. The shift was dragging. Around 9:30, I took a cart of boxes to the seasonal section and started unpacking. The store was quieter than usual, just a few stragglers wandering around before closing. I figured I could knock out the boxes quickly and get back to the stockroom before it got too late. I was kneeling on the floor, slicing open a box of Christmas lights, when I heard footsteps behind me. At first, I thought it was a coworker, but when I turned, my stomach flipped. A man was standing at the end of the aisle, not a shopper, not an employee. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with long hair that hung over his face. His clothes were dirty, layered like he'd been wearing the same outfit for days. His shoes were scuffed, almost falling apart, and he was just standing there, watching me. Can I help you?" I asked, my voice cracking. He didn't answer. For a long moment, he just stared. Then, slowly, he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that makes your stomach turn cold, the kind of smile predators have when they've found what they want. I stood up quickly, clutching the box cutter in my hand. My brain scrambled for something to say. "Sir, the store's closing soon. You'll need to head to the front." He tilted his head, almost curious, and whispered something. I couldn't hear it clearly, but it sounded like, "No one's here." Then he stepped toward me. Every instinct screamed at me to run. I backed up, my heart pounding so hard it hurt, and the box cutter shook in my hand. "Don't come any closer," I managed to say, but he didn't stop. His steps were slow, deliberate, like he was savoring every second of fear dripping off me. I darted down the aisle, my shoes squeaking on the linoleum. I didn't even look back at first, I just ran. When I finally glanced over my shoulder, he was following. Not sprinting, just walking, calm and steady, like he knew I couldn't escape. I tore through the aisles, searching for another employee, but the place felt empty. The overhead lights flickered in sections, shadows stretching long. The silence of the store made my own footsteps sound like gunshots. I made it to the stockroom door and shoved it open, slipping inside. My plan was to find my manager, or at least another worker, but when I looked around, the stockroom was dark. The shift team had apparently gone up front early. I was alone. The door behind me creaked. I spun around, box cutter raised, and saw him standing there in the doorway. His smile was wider now, his teeth yellow in the dim light. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered, but my voice was barely audible. He stepped inside, shutting the door softly behind him. Panic surged through me. I ran deeper into the stockroom, weaving between tall shelves stacked with boxes. My lungs burned, my legs felt weak, but I kept moving. Then I heard it. His footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Echoing in the darkness. He wasn't rushing. He didn't need to. He was enjoying this. I ducked behind a stack of boxes, trying to control my breathing. My chest heaved so hard I thought it would give me away. The footsteps stopped. Silence. I pressed a hand over my mouth, praying he couldn't hear me. And then, from the other side of the shelf, his voice. "I like when they hide." I nearly screamed. I bolted, knocking over a box in my panic. The sound echoed like thunder. I sprinted down the aisle, searching for an exit. Finally, I spotted the emergency door at the far end of the stockroom. I charged toward it, shoving through the clutter, my vision tunneling. But just as I reached for the handle, I felt a hand grab my shoulder. I screamed, twisting around, slashing blindly with the box cutter. The blade connected. He yelped, stumbling back, clutching his arm. In the dim light, I saw a dark stain spreading across his sleeve. I didn't wait. I shoved through the emergency door, the alarm blaring as I burst into the freezing night air. I ran across the loading dock, down the ramp, and into the parking lot. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pull my phone from my pocket, but I managed to dial 911. The police showed up minutes later. They searched the stockroom and the aisles, but the man was gone. The weirdest part? There was no record of him leaving the store. No one saw him exit. The cameras near the front never caught him. It was like he vanished. For weeks after, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smile, heard that whisper. No one's here. I quit Target not long after. I couldn't walk into that stockroom again without feeling like he was still there, waiting. Sometimes when I'm driving late at night and I pass that Target, I swear I see someone standing near the loading dock. Tall, still, watching. And every time my stomach turns cold, because part of me knows he's still out there, maybe hiding in another store, waiting for the next person who thinks they're alone.